Hey people. Okay, so what we got this week is two lessons that connect algebra to geometry using some of the formulas. So we've got two lessons, no quiz this week, which you probably already heard in the intro video, but no quiz this week. So just these two last formative assessments. Again, I'm going to say this in the next video too. Make sure you clear up any loose ends, submit any assignments that you need to, and so we can get this year wrapped up. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this first lesson that we have is the midpoint formula. Now, you will learn all about the midpoint formula in geometry. We just wanted to kind of, do a little foreshadowing, just show you just a little bit of the ways algebra connects to geometry. Okay. Now, so as you're probably guessing, as the name entails, the midpoint of a segment is just basically the middle point between any two coordinates of any segment. Okay, so if we had segment AB, the midpoint of segment AB, call it M, is basically equidistant to A and B. This distance here is congruent to this distance here. It is halfway through, halfway from A to B or halfway from B to A, whichever way you want to think about it. Now you can find the midpoint. Now, and we're talking about these as coordinates. Okay, if I put these on like a coordinate plane somehow and give these coordinates, XY coordinates, we can use this midpoint formula to find the location of that midpoint M. Okay. So basically what we're doing here is with the midpoint formula is you can actually do that by calculating the average of the x coordinates and the average of the y coordinates. Now remember what that word average means, or mean. It would be, if I wanted to find the average of 5 values, I'm going to add up those 5 values and divide it by 5. Average of 10 values, I would add up the 10 values and then divide it by 10. But the thing is, so if you're finding the average of the x coordinates, well, you have this first x coordinate and the second x coordinate. You really only have 2 values. So you're just going to add those two together and then divide by 2. And then you have the same thing for the y values. You've got a y value for point A and you've got a y value for point B. You add them together and then you divide by 2. So you're basically finding the average of those two coordinates. So that gives us the midpoint formula here. Okay, x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and then y1 plus y2 divided by 2. I know this diagram looks really funky, and even maybe the formula would look a little funky too, but just know all you're doing is really just finding the average of the x coordinates and the average of the y coordinates. You're adding them together and then dividing by 2. And notice here you're taking x1 and x2. You're taking both x and y, both x coordinates out of both coordinates A and B, and then you're dividing it by 2. You're finding the sum and then dividing by 2. And then for the y value, you're taking y1 plus y2 divided by 2. A common misconception is to try to take x1 plus y1, like try to take both these coordinates together, then divided by 2. No. You're taking the x coordinate from one and the x coordinate from the other, taking the x's together, then dividing them by 2. So for example here, and again, do this along with me with your guided notes. -8, 3 and -2, 7. I don't even need to graph this. If I wanted to graph it, I could, and you'll see some with graphing down below. But if I wanted to graph it, I could, but I really don't need to, because I've got the the x coordinate is going to be -8 and -2 divided by 2. That's the x coordinate. And then obviously, if I want the midpoint, it's going to be an x and a y pair. So the y value is going to be the y coordinate plus the y coordinate divided by 2. Okay, remember this is x1, y1. This is x2, y2. Okay, so -8 and -2 make -10. Divided by 2 is -5. -5 is my x value of the midpoint. 3 and 7 make 10, positive 10 this time. A positive 5 is the y value. So if I were to think about, like, remember, you should think about this logically. If I had, -8, 3, somewhere over here, and then -2, 7, would it really make sense that the midpoint is at -5, 5? Yeah, looks like about that's the midpoint, right? So you should always logically reason it through. Think about, okay, is the midpoint lining up exactly where I should? Like a common thing to do would maybe say, oops, I lost that negative somewhere along the way. And then maybe you would have put your your midpoint out here at 5, 5 and thought, whoa, that's not the middle of those two coordinates, and then maybe go back and check your answer. You should always make sure your answers are logical. Okay, why don't you pause and try the next two on your own and then play when ready. Okay, so the two x coordinates here are 2 and 1, and the two y coordinates are 4 and -3. Okay, so I've got 2 and 1 make 3, and 4 and -3 make 1. Okay, if I wanted to leave it as fraction form, I could there, but let's put it as decimals. 1.5 comma 0.5. And there's my answer. Okay, and one more. I've got -5.1 plus 1.4, and then -2 and 1.7. Okay, -5.1 and 1.4. Let me get out a calculator here. 5.1 negative plus 1. Oops, that's 100. 1.4 -3.7. Just divide that by 2 real quick. -1.85. Okay, and now the y values. -2 plus 1.7 would be a -0.3. And then I divide that by 2. 0.15, right? -0.15. Okay, and there's my answer. Okay. Okay, so now let's take a look at, that's just given the two coordinates, right? Just without a graph or anything like that. Let's actually give you the graph and say, find where the midpoint is, right? Find where the midpoint is. Well, there's another way to think about this logically, right? Where is the middle? Like if I'm thinking about the x values here, I've got an x value at -1, and then I've got an x value at -5. Like that's the left and right of this, right? What's halfway in between -1 and -5? Well, look at it graphically right here. This is the halfway point between -1 and -5, right? So right here. And now think about it up and down. I lost me into my segment. Okay, there we go. We have, goes all the way up to here and all the way down to here, okay? -1 to -5 again, right? So what's the halfway point in between these two y values, between -1 and -5? Right here. So there's my midpoint, right? It's lining up right there, okay? Where is that? That's -3 comma -3. If I really wanted to, I could pick out these coordinates, -1, -1, and -5, -5, and run them through the midpoint formula. -1 plus -5, -1 plus -5. That would give me a -6, which gets me -3, -3. See, it does the exact same thing, okay, using the formula. Let's take a look here. Now this one's not as easy to see, right? This is not, because it doesn't land at a nice clean spot. So think about this. Okay, this is 0, 0, right? This is 5, comma 4. I've got to figure out, okay, so this was think about the x coordinates here. I've got a 0 and it goes up to 5. What's halfway between 0 and 5? 2.5 for my x values, right? That's my midpoint for the x values, 2.5. What's the midpoint for the y values? Well, I'm ranging from 0 to 4. Well, it's halfway between 0 to 4, 2. So my midpoint should be 2.5 comma 2. Now, I've already picked off the coordinates, so let's just run it through the formula. 0 plus 5 over 2, and 0 plus 4 over 2. Because it's at 0, 0, that's a little easier to calculate. 5 over 2 is 2.5. 4 over 2 is 2. So it does check out. That is my correct midpoint. Okay. Last set of problems here. Last set of examples. Okay, so what if I tell you this? Like, what if we're on a coordinate plane? Let me get a coordinate plane here for you. Drag this in. Okay, and I said, okay, I've got an endpoint at -1, 9. That's an endpoint. Notice the notation here, endpoint. And what about if I say the midpoint is at -9, -10? That's a midpoint. Where is the other endpoint? Well, if this is the midpoint, think about it. This is only halfway to, whoa, sorry about the snaky line there. This is only halfway to the other point. I've got to like double that distance all the way down there, right? And figure out that coordinate down below. That might be a pain to do in the graph. So watch what I can say here. Watch what I can do. I've got an endpoint at -1, 9. And I've got a midpoint at -9, -10. Think about how much I change. How much do I change going from -1 to -9? What's the amount of change? Well, the amount of change there is I'm going down 8 units, right? I'm going down 8 units, -1 to -9. So if this is endpoint to midpoint, I'm only halfway there. I need to go that whole distance more. So I need to go a whole another 8 units down to find where my final endpoint is. So what would be down 8 more units? And -9 minus 8 is -17. Think about that same reasoning for my y values. I'm at 9. I'm going down to -10. How much did I drop? I dropped -19. I'm going to go that exact same amount. I'm going to go down 19 more. Okay, so -20. Oops, got a blue marker there. -29. Right, that's my other endpoint. Okay, let's try that one more time. I'm at 5, 2. I'm at -10, -2. That's halfway there, right? I've got an endpoint, then a midpoint. I need to find where is that other coordinate for the endpoint, right? I'm basically thinking about, well, where is this point? This is point A, this is point B, this is the midpoint, right? Okay, so what am I doing? How am I going from 5 to -10? I'm dropping 15 units, right? So go down 15 more units, -25. How much am I dropping from 2 to -2? I'm going down 4. So drop down 4 again. -6. Final answer, -25, -6. There's my answer there. Okay. All right. For the homework, make sure you only have to do the 2 to 26 even. Click on that midpoint formula worksheet and then do 2 to 26 even. All right. Have a good day.